Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the To Be Fit podcast. I'm super excited to have one of my original mentors in both business and fitness, Alwyn Cosgrove, on the show today. Alwyn, welcome.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. Been a wee while.
Yeah. So quick story that I feel like is super important to share. And I don't know if I'm sure I have in some point, but never, and this isn't truly face to face, but to say thank you that when how I first came across, how I first met Alwyn, I would say I was a 20 something year old kid in college. You were writing for Elite Fitness at the time. So back then there was no Instagram, I guess there was Facebook, but you just had to keep pressing refresh on the T Nation and Elite FTS sites to see what people were doing and try and learn. So I was competing in powerlifting. I think at the time it was maybe you and Jay were the only like personal trainers really on the site, right?
Yeah, Jay Fruja.
I was starting to work with some clients to make some money, and I was like, oh, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing, in these forums. So I started following your work. I was buying what I could, and then there came this moment where I think you put out the first program design Bible that you put out. Yeah. And so what year was that? Had to be. You remember what year that was?
No, it's now evolved to the book that's behind me on the shelf, The Secrets of Successful Program Design. This is like probably its 10th iteration. Yeah. 02.
Yeah. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So I was still in college. So, obviously I didn't have a ton of money, and I think it was like $140. I think that was like the price point for it, something like that. And, I remember I looked on the one site, and on Elite, it was listed for $150. And then on another site, not to be named, it was listed for like $45. And I was like, or it was something like, it was much cheaper. And I was like, man.
Hope it wasn't that much cheaper, but I remember this situation.
The story was, it was whatever you charged them, right? Whatever you charged them, they just listed it at that. It was an accident. So when I saw it on the other site, I was like, I emailed Dave Tate, because my uncle was writing for the site at the time. And I said, listen, I want to give you guys the business. You guys put out so much content. I've learned so much. If this is what it costs, like, I'll pay it. It's fine. Like, but I just want to make sure it's not a mistake. It shouldn't be costing this. And then like a day went by, and Dave emailed me back, and he was like, no, he's like, that looks like what we pay for it. He's like, that's the actual price. And I guess he copied you on the email. And
I remember this.
And then you emailed back, and you were like, hey, like, we haven't met. Like, it looks like you bought, like, I had bought one or two other DVDs at a time before, when you and Dose were putting out, like, the complexes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, those were great business comments. Like, go in and pick out two other things that you don't have, and I'll send them to you. And like, that made a huge impression on me, of not just as a coach, because I was always there to learn, but of like, man, I didn't know that was someone that owned a business halfway across the country could do. And now, 20 years later, 2 training studios, and if people want to know what doing that for someone, can do, like, I just always wanted to say thank you. And then obviously I ended up in your mentorship program for business coaching before I was an owner, and that's where we're at today. So just wanted to,
I think a part of the lesson there is, and I think it comes from the phrase extreme ownership didn't exist until Jocko Willink wrote a book. Right. But, which is now like a 10-year-old book, but that's an example of it, is that I could say, oh, that was a mistake with the other company. Hands up, which it literally was. But I'm like, let me own it. Let me take charge of this and then fix it. So that the story ends with a tale of you not saying how much I sucked and how this was a problem, and how you change it. And it's something I use when someone comes into the gym and they tell me about a bad experience at another gym. It's very easy to go, oh, yeah, those guys suck. But I take ownership, because it's my industry. And I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that. Just as if it was my fault, right? And so I take ownership for that, although years later I can tell you it was just an error on somebody else's website. But it was, it's definitely, if you can get an opportunity to over-deliver, then you should take it. And it just, 23 years later, you're still remembering it. That's right. And I'm sure you would remember for an extra 23 years if you'd gotten screwed on that deal.
Yeah. I mean, I share that. Anybody I end up talking business about, and they ask me for like, anecdotal advice, I always share that story, because I think it's I go over, what it probably costs for you to do that versus what my eventual investment in, Results Fitness University and everything else going forward from there. And not saying that was the end goal, but I'm just saying because people always ask, well, what's the ROI on doing something like that? And it's like, most of the time probably zero, but that's not the point, right? In these other times, it can have a huge impact. And, like I said, again, just as a general thank you. That's why
I thank you for telling that story. I'm sure there's people who've had a negative experience that I'm unaware of who are telling that story too. So I appreciate that I had the ability to fix it.
So hopefully that shines a little bit of better light for those people. So anyway, to back up a little bit, you and Rach have been open for how long in Santa Clarita, California? Your Results Fitness?
25 years next month, I think.
Right. Yeah. And for background for other people that are, might not be aware listening to the podcast, you guys both run Results Fitness University, where you're mentoring other gym owners, whether they're starting up their business or they've been in this for a while. How long has that been running?
That probably started officially. I had people approaching me very early. It was very not formal, as you know, but we separated I'll tell you a legal story. We separated the companies about 2004. I'd been sick. I had, for those of you who don't know, I had cancer. I had to step out of the business for a while. But at the time, and it was probably a little easier then to become known. There were 2 websites, maybe 3 that you could write for, and I was writing for all 3. It was Men's Health, Men's Fitness. That was kind of it. And I was writing for both of those. Now it's a little harder to become well known, but it's actually a lot easier to get an audience, right? But then I was getting asked to write articles and do some speaking and things. And while I was unable to work at the gym, we set up this separate part of the company, which time is alwyncosgrove.com. And that's where it started. And it just kind of evolved. And one year we got a letter from the IRS asking why there was all these travel expenses within the .com business. And I was like, it's not really just online anymore, right? It's going to kind of change. So we ended up getting audited and we won the audit, but I changed the name of the company to stop being that. So probably in the sort of format that it is now, probably 20-ish years, but very informal in the beginning, much more structured now. But it's there's a Michael Dell quote from Dell Computers that if you listen to your customers, they'll tell you what they want. I just started getting business questions like it, and rather than just be like, here's what you do, I just was like, man, they're not really asking so much about the programming. They're asking about how did you do small group? How are you doing semi-private? And it just kind of became like a solution to a problem. And that kind of established. So, and now we kind of run both companies sort of hand in hand. Very evolved over the years, but I've been fortunate that I've been able to expand within the same place as my original location. And
I've always been so jealous of that, right? Like, so for the background,
it's a complete fluke. I wish I told you that was my master plan. Right.
So for anybody listening that obviously doesn't know what we're talking about, you were in, like, let's say, so imagine a regular strip mall that, started on all the way on one end and then doing well. And it was like, hey, the studio next to you just went out. Do you want that? Yes. Do really well, fill that one. Next one, I'm making it sound a lot easier than I'm sure it was, but in general, you were able to kind of take over.
As challenging as it was, we were reaching a point where I was going to have to move, and then the next door location came up. So now I have there's only one part of the strip mall that I don't have, and it was because that's where the owner of the strip mall had their business. But I have 5 of the units that was originally one. I had originally 650 square feet of gym floor, and then through some creative setup, I now got about 5,000 square feet of gym floor plus office space and front desk. Yeah,
I remember those old pictures from some of the first manuals and stuff that you guys put out. I was like, you're doing step ups in a box, and you saw like the desk, the sales area, it was all in one.
Just and everything in those pictures, Brian, was pushed in and make it look like I had loads of equipment. If you panned out, there was nothing else in the room.
But I mean, I feel like that's a good segue into one of the questions I had is like, you've mentioned plenty of times on different podcasts and in your writing about like the pendulum swinging way too far to one end and then coming all the way back and usually kind of finding somewhere in the middle. And, you have more experience in business coaching than I do. So that's why I'm asking you, do you feel like the pendulum has kind of swung too far to the other direction now? You mentioned like, hey, no one's asking about programming. No one's asking about like how to get better results with their clients. People are starting to ask me business questions because like, I feel like at that time, there were a lot of people getting great results with their clients, and they're like, but for some reason, I can't balance this business stuff now. And again, maybe it's just because it's easier to find or it's more in front of you, but I feel like there's this shift of like, just give me the way that I can get 100 more leads. And it's like, hey, maybe you don't need 100 more leads if like you got really great results with your clients. Like, do you feel like it's kind of swung, or is it balanced? Like, where are you at with that?
It swings continuously, right? The pendulum just constantly swings. And I think back at one point, I had a lot of good coaches who were, the only educational opportunity was more certs, like more certifications, more courses. And there was nobody really teaching you billing or finance or anything. You could learn that. Obviously, they existed in colleges and things, but there was no one demonstrating it from a sort of fitness operator's point of view. Sort of the first stuff I started learning was like a side business with information products where you would sell courses, DVDs and things like that. So there was a lot of good coaches there who weren't making it because they had no business acumen. And I always said that like, you're a black belt in coaching, but you're such a white belt in business, you're going to have a white belt, life. And then I started getting people who've got, 500,000 followers on Instagram and Facebook, right? And they've got multiple lead funnels, but they're just so there's guys now, and I mean this, you take all the opportunities you get. I know there's guys now who are getting so much ad revenue on YouTube that they're pretending they're still coaching, but they're not. They're just making all their money on that. There's not a judgment on that, other than why don't you just make it obvious? So I think it swings constantly, and I think now we're in the sort of middle of maybe in a sweet spot for a little while where the good coaches are making decent money, right? But your skill set has had to evolve, right? Like the client that walks in today, the beginner client that walks in is not the client that walked in 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? They're coming in with different goals and often coming in worse shape than ever before, right? Like I used to talk about, man, I really can customize things for those few people that have little orthopedic issues. Now they all have orthopedic issues. They're all coming in banged up. But yeah, I think there is a trend where, particularly post-lockdown, where there's a lot of coaches who are just not, I don't want to say it, there's a lot of fitness professionals who are just not coaching, who are not working, training people. And I genuinely have no judgment of how they're making their money, but I'm like, you're not coaches. Stop saying that you are, right?
It's a different skill set. It's a different game. And like the things that can get likes, shares, and follows aren't necessarily the same things that get people.
Yeah, I've seen that too with mine. Is like the bulk of what we do, Brian, is I got this from Mark Verstegen, is simple exercises coached savagely well, right? The bulk of my program is just basic stuff: squats, deadlifts, push, pull, lunge. When I post that stuff, it's a blank. When I post someone doing a complex or a rotational cable chop or something, or something a little more sexy that blows up, but you'd be very disappointed if you hire me to train you, because that's just a tiny little bit of what we do. For like, you'll see one of the high level obstacle course race people doing something kind of cool, and that still the bulk of their program looks very simple. Like you wouldn't think it was that cool when you see it, but there's a little part where you still have to get eyes on your business, right? You still have to get, attract people in some way. And so some of that stuff, there's a place for it, right?
Sure. It's just like anything else. You've always taught me to, hey, absorb what's useful and discard the rest. So if learn from the best marketers, learn from the best coaches, and, but don't mistake one for the other, right? The best marketers aren't always the best coaches, and vice versa. If you can kind of.
Yeah. And I think that to your point, it's like, I want 100 leads. The quick question for that is, how long have you been open? If somebody says 5 years, I'm like, how come you got 100 spaces?
Right. Yeah.
Right. How come you got so much room? And honestly, if I sent you 20 people tomorrow, could you even onboard them effectively? Do you have the systems in place to take them on? And it's the only question that everyone, they know how to ask. Yeah, it is. Yeah. They think everything can be solved with more. There's only 3 ways to make money in business, right? First one is more clients. Second one is to get those clients to spend more money per visit. And the third one is to get them to make more visits. But people are so focused on bucket one that retention is the other two. Retention and upgrades are the other two. But it is we've said this before. When Elias was working with Elias Scar, he was like a sales guru. Because everybody says I'm good at sales until they realize how bad they are at marketing. And then once you get good at marketing, you realize a whole bunch of people come in and see you and they don't join because you can't communicate the value. And you've got so many people leaving out of the back end because your product itself isn't good, right? Give me the greatest marketing plan in the world, and the big competitive advantage always is if you opened a fast food place, you can have any advantage you want. The tastiest burger, the clown, the Colonel Sanders story, anything you want is your advantage. You could choose it. The only advantage you want is to be where hungry people are, right? Now that's always the marketing story about getting in front of the right audience. But what if the product is garbage? It doesn't matter how hungry they are; they're going to go somewhere else, right? So there's the marketing is about doing good stuff and telling people about it. Are you doing good stuff? If not, let's rewind and get good.
And that's the problem that I have noticed just from watching from afar, is that there's a lot of people, like I always just use like sauce as an analogy, right? There's a lot of people now that can help you make a better label for the sauce, have a better commercial for the sauce, have a better jar, and like tell you how to more efficiently manufacture the jar so that you save some cents here, and then people taste it and they're like, this sucks. Like, so now I have 10,000 people trying something that no one actually likes. So, all right. So moving past that point.
It starts with a good sauce. There's the catchphrase. It all starts with good sauce.
That's it. Start with a good sauce, because I think, a lot of the problems that you mentioned too, like, hey, there's a lot of things that you can do to improve retention, right? Number one is give the clients what they're actually looking for and give them results, right? But all right, so moving forward from that, in terms of actual training and this pendulum idea of like things swinging one way too far to one side or the other, my question with that as well is like, have we swung way too far on this like science-based training stuff? Because listen, you were always the person when I read, your stuff from Elite or whatever, you were one of the few people that referenced, or, hey, here's where I got this from. I remember even Afterburn had a page of references of research to reference, but it was still put into a way that you could actually do it. And now there's tons of people like focusing on the 1 degree that they're doing like a lat pull down on to try and get this extra bit of stretch. And I feel like a bit of training intensity has been lost. So, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, because I know you're a science-based person, which I think we all need to be, but I think it's the application maybe that sometimes that gets a little bit lost.
Well, I think what gets missed is there's this thing now, like evidence-based practice is the phrase they use, right? Like it's got to be shown in the literature to be effective. But everybody knows what the Tabata protocol is, right? Mm-hmm. There was only 8 subjects in that. I had more people in my 6 a.m. class this morning, right? And that was like an 8-week study, and I've had them for a year. So just because I didn't publish it doesn't mean that evidence is any less valid. So what about practice-based evidence? What are good coaches doing right now? So a study shows that A group of clients under B conditions with C control for D length of time saw E result. So if I told you there's a program that helped people lose a pound of body fat a week doing 10 minutes of exercise a week, and you're interested in that, right? Well, it was 100-year-old females. Now it's invalid for teenagers, right? And it was over the course of this period of time, and it was compared to this. Like everything has to be the same for that to be truly valid. So there is a part where you got to look at the research and go, are these my clients? Because every study on strength training is largely machine based, because it takes too long to learn people good mechanics, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say that some of the studies on exercise don't actually reflect how you train people right now. Like it'll be a bench press machine, a leg press machine, maybe a chest supported row or something like that. I'd understand why for the study purposes, but that's not how you train people. Mm-hmm. Right. So we have to take it. I don't want to ignore it. I don't want to be that guy who's like, the human body hasn't changed in years. Actually, it has. Mm-hmm. And people are getting in worse shape. And we do know more, and our program should evolve. But I also don't want to ignore what like the pre-steroid area bodybuilders were doing, because that clearly worked. Mm-hmm. Right. And guys got strong before, and guys got fast before. So there is some of that. So I think, again, it's that. Probably a year from now, I'll be complaining, or I tend not to complain. I'll be observing that there's coaches out there who are not reading anything scientific at all, right? And are back to reading these, bodybuilding magazines. There's no magazines anymore, bodybuilding websites and YouTube clips. So I think evidence-based practice is a powerful thing. And I think it does help you, cover your butt a little bit when you're showing there's a standard of care to what we do. But I think it's more important to study what good coaches are doing. Right? I think that's evidence too, right? That's like the phrase practice-based evidence. What are good coaches doing that? And if I look at things like, myself, you, Joe DeFranco, guys all over, Mark Verstegen, Mike Boyle, we might disagree on a couple of little things, but the bulk of it seems to be we seem to have got something there, right? And then I think the little differences are based on your own experience and your own clients that are a little different. So I think there is, just don't read the science, but coach the person in front of you. But my best example of that is every study on fat loss nutrition has shown that if you control for protein and calories, you keep them the same, the carb-fat ratio doesn't matter. But it does matter because you're going to prefer one over the other, and you're going to be compliant to one more than the other. My wife, Rachel, she likes olive oil and avocados, and she likes a more fat-rich diet. I don't enjoy that as much. So it doesn't matter. Well, it does, because if you put me on her diet, I'm not going to be compliant. So, I mean, follow the science, but don't ignore your own experience and coach the person in front of you with respect to that.
I know my opinion on research changed when I was a subject of one of them when I was in college, and we literally just knew that we had to show up at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. And we're like, all right, well, I don't know what we're going to be doing. So, we all went out the night before, drank, partied. And then I showed up the next morning, and it was like a study on the effects of black tea supplementation. And I had to do a Wingate test at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, hungover. And it's for you don't know, I had blood draws coming out of my arm while I'm on a bike, and it's sprint as hard as you can. And they drop the weight while you have a bunch of research assistants yelling at you. And I'm just trying not to throw up in front of my professor. And that information was in there. That was in the study. Yeah. I definitely did better.
Danger goes, your pre-test conditions were not the same, right?
I definitely did better in 12 weeks.
The finding is invalid.
Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with the black tea supplement that I was taking. I felt a lot better in 12 weeks. So, talking about that, how has your approach? I mean, it changed to how you guys are delivering what you would call best practice at Results Fitness now in terms of delivering now. How has that evolved over the last, 20 years?
So it's always hard to think because there's never been a line where I'm like, man, we're making a massive change. But over time, it kind of course corrects. People have less time. That's the first thing. So our programs tend to be, I used to write separate strength and conditioning days. And now I feel like I got to take advantage of getting a little bit of everything in every time I see you, right? So it might just be 5 intervals, 5 30-second intervals at the end of the session. So the workouts have become more, not just total body, total fitness, ideally. If I only saw you once a week, we touched everything. I look at residual training effects a lot more. Aerobic conditioning stays around for about 30 days without touching it. Speed stays around for 3 to 4. So you got to touch speed. I've had an athlete at the obstacle course race world championships in Costa Rica. We did speed workout when we're out there because it was gonna be detraining by race time. We didn't have to do any cardio work because it stays. So I always look at that in terms of a longer term approach. I pay a bigger attention to non-exercise activity than before. For example, if I've got two identical twin females, they're both 35. One takes the dog for a 30-minute walk in the morning, goes to work as a school teacher, is on her feet all day, comes home, takes the dog for a 30-minute walk, and then comes to the gym to see me. Contrast that with her identical twin who doesn't have pets, gets in the car and does a 1 hour commute, has an 8-hour desk job, a 1 hour commute home, and then comes and sees me. Well, in the first case, 30 minutes of cardio is not going to move the needle at all. She's already moving a lot. The second one, it's going to be magic. Right? This extra activity is going to be magical. So I think being more aware of adjusting what I do based on what they do outside the gym has become a little more important to me. I genuinely don't program any, unless you have a cardiovascular fitness goal, you want to run a 5K or something. I really don't program a lot of that at all anymore. Just a little touch. If you're getting a lot of steps, if you're getting 10,000 steps a day, 20 minutes in the treadmill isn't going to lean you out faster. Now you're at 1,500 steps a day. I've done a day full of Zoom calls. I'm like, dude, I don't move. Right? That day adding 30 minutes in the treadmill can be a lot.
That was the biggest. I remember when COVID first hit and I was doing a lot of remote sessions. I remember I'm like, oh, like, so this is how the people I coach actually feel. I was like, cause I would sit there and be on Zoom for 8 hours. And then I looked down at my watch and like 800 steps and it'd be 4 PM. And I'm like, damn, I definitely never accounted for how hard that could potentially be. But we're trying to fill the empty buckets, right? And I think what people's empty buckets have changed, right? People used to be like, when they're short on time, we've tried to get better in our systems of, like you're saying, like asking a lot more questions on the front end, because you could get people who are coming in, they're doing their 2 or 3 day a week plan, and stuff still isn't moving in the right direction, and you end up wasting time trying to figure out what's going to be the, what's going to give you that, hey, for a moderate increase in this, you're going to get a 10x result, as opposed to how much more it was going to take to do this other stuff.
That's a great phrase. Talking about science, there's actually a cool study I saw last year, and it was overweight females, but I think this one would apply to a different demographic. And they had them do, they call it 2+2, 2 strength plus 2 cardio sessions a week. And they found that they increased their average daily activity by another 150 calories a day over and above that. So they trained 4 times a week, and then they burned another 1,050 a week just in extra movement. Then they put the group on 3+3. So they did 6 times a week training. They actually reduced their non-exercise activity by about 250, right? Or slightly around that. So that meant that over the course of the week, by comparing the two groups, the top group was burning 3,500 calories more every 7 to 10 days, more than the group that trained more, which completely cancels out the extra sessions. So you could have a situation where you add a training session to a body comp client's regime, and as a result, they're so tired, they move less the rest of the week. They go to bed earlier, they take a nap, and maybe they sleep a little deeper. And you're like, man, the needle's not moving. What's your instinct? Your instinct is to add another session, right? Where the instinct could be to pull a session back and look at that step count, perhaps. Like I've started using step count as my spell check. Like if that drops off, we might be dieting too hard, we might be pushing too hard. So, I mean, that's the kind of, in terms of exercise stuff, I mean, and since 2000, kettlebells, sandbags, and TRX have arrived. TRX kind of eliminated the stability ball for a lot of my stuff. Sleds have arrived.
All the older coaches and their joints are all beat up. Everybody's going back to machines.
Yeah. I've never been against machines. I've just never had the space to put a lot of them in.
Sure. Yeah. If I had the space, there's a lot of pieces that I love, especially for like rowing and some lower body stuff that I'd love. But like, you're going to get a belt squat. I think any of the ones that like attach to a rack, I've played around with them. It's not the same because you can't hold on to anything. Like, and I've
tried doing it with just putting it with the bar and like the landmine, the fulcrum thing, and it's still not the same. It's not. It's a poor substitute for the substitute isn't worth the time in the programming. If you don't have the belt squat, you're trying to figure that out. It doesn't work. But I think the other question is, are the older coaches' joints beat up because of poor training? That's a question I have to throw out. Is that had less meatheady training in the past? Is that a result of shitty training that you need to do this? But yeah, there are machines that I really like. I can't justify the real estate in my space.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And we talked about this the other week, sleds. I think sleds are amazing. As I get busier, it's too impractical to use a lot of.
And it becomes a crutch, like sometimes, like of like, your knees bothering you a little bit, drag the sled, and it's like, now you got like, and like you said, if we look at where clients are coming in the doors from even 10 or 15 years ago, you're getting a lot more of that. So a lot more now I got 5 beginners, they got, reverse sled drag, programmed in there. And I only have, this slate of turf, and you got one person who wants to try to warm up, and then I got 3 people dragging the sleds up and down.
Yeah, that's we had a discussion on that, you and I, like privately, but there's no secrets. I'm just like, I still love it. I'm all for it. Practically it's kind of drifted out of our programs because I can't justify clearing out a whole turf for one person to drag a sled back and forth, right? Like I have 4 sleds. They get used a lot less than they did. So that's something that's kind of come and gone. Like it kind of added in for a lot of stuff, and it's diminished again. And then, yeah, I don't know. I'd like to go back in time and see a snapshot of what I was doing then. Then I can tell you, oh, I don't do that anymore, right? So
Yeah, and that was one of the questions that got posed is like if so again, for anybody listening who's unfamiliar, Alan had two products, Afterburn 1, Afterburn 2. They were correct me if you want to change my wording, but they were fat loss specific body comp programs. So what would that look like? What would Afterburn 3 look like now? Like if you were to put Afterburn 3 out in a month, what would that look like? Would you still be killing me with 20 rep squats and barbell complexes?
So that's a good question, actually. So for people listening, but these were like 2004. So we're talking about 21 years ago, which at the time, I think I was the first person, I'm sure there was somebody, but to talk about weight training as the primary intervention for fat loss training. At the time, it was aerobics. So I did a three-pronged approach where it was heavy weight training, and then what I've now it was a circuit of a couple of exercises, and the later circuits were the same exercises but for 15 to 20 reps. I now call that loaded cardio, right? It's a piece of like using resistance training for cardio. And excuse me, on the opposite days, we did interval training. So I had done strength training, loaded cardio, and interval training when the rest of the world or the rest of the industry were really pushing faster cardio, low intensity aerobics, right? So the second iteration of that, I used barbell complexes as interval training in place, right? That was the idea. It was a continuous circuit. A complex is just a circuit where you don't put the bar down, right? So I had a lot of people going, the program's great, I just can't do it in a commercial gym. And that one, I found that the first program maybe needed a little heavier component to it. So I had an undulating periodization where we did one day of heavy fives, a day of 10s, and a lighter day, a deload day of 15. But we still had that loaded cardio piece in it. Now, oh wow, heavier, and the loaded cardio would be more things like battle ropes, kettlebell swings, things like that. I would probably have a questionnaire on how many steps you had, and that would determine whether you did interval training or not.
I think that point that you just brought up there is interesting because like there's been a pushback from some coaches of like, no, we need to do more low intensity steady state stuff, and it's like, well, because the void in people's training now is they're not doing any it's not the thing, it's the fact that they are not, the average person now has eliminated it to zero, so of course that's going to have the biggest.
There's the pendulum, right?
The biggest uptick.
People were doing nothing heavy and nothing hard in the past, right? So I wrote an article years ago called The Hierarchy of Fat Loss. And I wish podcasts and stuff existed then, because there's nuance to whatever I said. I said the number one thing was nutrition, and number two was nutrition. You could get lean with no exercise, and everybody forgets that part. And then I said the next thing is strength training, then interval training, then low intensity cardio with respect to unit of time, right? So, and only as regards fat loss. So if you're a 5K runner or you were training for, something else, cardio has a huge place. Like if you've got 8 hours a day of training, you're not going to train more than heavy for 90 minutes. So I'd put you on, you'd watch 2 movies on the treadmill, right? If I was on Biggest Loser. But it was all with respect to the unit of time, that what was your best use of your time? But we're in a situation now where I think there's a bigger place for low intensity cardio just because the pendulum swung to the other end.
Yeah. So I think like, so, let's rehash that, because that was one of the questions that we had is like, hey, you're someone who spends a ton amount of time looking at the research. And I think there's an over inundation with people in podcasts. It's all great information, but from doctors, from, people who are strictly just in the science and they don't have the practicality. So they're presenting information, while true, it's not applicable to anybody that you or I would probably train on a day-to-day basis in the gym.
If you get an hour a week with somebody, what are you going to do?
That's the question. It's like, hey, I got an hour, or I got 45 minutes 3 days a week. What am I focusing on?
And then you have that school teacher who gets 15,000 steps a day, and her goal is just body comp. it's going to be a nutrition and a more intense approach to exercise. Whereas the person who's really sedentary, you might see magic with just aerobic program, right? I still prefer, I feel like strength training should be illegal. It works so well, right? If you were to package that up, everything that strength training did to somebody, it would be a banned substance. That's how powerful it is. So I think aerobic fitness, I think, is super important. I think there's a lot of ways to develop it. For a body comp client, it's the biggest part is the energy expenditure. So if they're getting a lot of steps in daily activity, it's that bucket is full, right? If you take an advanced power lifter who can't walk up a flight of stairs, there's an empty bucket there, and it's not maximal strength. I will
right? say that was my first experience doing the original Afterburn. My training partner was Juliet Wendler, and we finished it. We did a powerlifting meet, and then we were like, "Oh, this will be fun. Like, let's just do we finished a meet, and we were like, let's just do this." And I remember just she was in much better shape because she did figure shows and stuff like that.
She did figures and stuff.
So
yeah,
I was at the time I was competed at 198, and this was when I was first starting to all right, let me get health and fitness more into the realm here. Yeah. I was done with that, and I remember they just dying and her just laughing at me, and so that was a huge jump from traditional West Side template to, hey, now I'm going to do afterburn and just suffering. But it sounds
there's a piece of that which becomes interesting, right? Where I did a seminar a couple of years ago, and it was called Training the Beginner, and the assumption is a beginner is a deconditioned person who's never done anything before. A beginner just means you haven't done it before. Yeah, that's all. But that could be for an advanced Olympic lifter. That could be powerlifting. You can start them on a very basic power. They don't need an advanced powerlifting program just because they're good at clean and jerks and snatches. You take an advanced cross-country runner and put him in a bodybuilding, he starts at the beginning. So you have to cut out all these coughs, guys.
Sorry. They'll take care of it.
I've got COVID. It seems. When you take a beginner, I use the example that I was an international competitor in Taekwondo. If I started karate, which is close, I may progress faster than somebody who has no experience, but I'm still going to have to start as a beginner. So you do see sometimes, I remember getting things through Elite FTS is, hey, I'm an elite powerlifter who's decided to get healthy. What is your, what are your suggestions for an advanced athlete such as myself to get lean? Because you're an overweight beginner is my suggestion.
Who goes like
your previous, your previous exercise history is put that on maintenance. And honestly, those are the guys that I read I'd get a thing I read all your stuff about interval training and circuit training and complexes. I just got lean walking 30 minutes a day in the morning. Of course you did, because all you did was sit all day, right? You added the empty bucket and it becomes magical. But an endurance athlete who's still overweight isn't going to move the needle by doing more aerobic work, right?
I think that's a great point, and I've tried to point that out to some of our coaches as well, and other coaches that I've talked to. Is that I think sometimes that's the mistake, is that you have someone who maybe comes into the facility and you do their eval and their intake, and they're like, I play this sport, I did this in college, and immediately the excitement is going off that oh, this is an advanced client. And it just be, they could be the rec league tennis champion in here. So immediately you're like, oh, they're going to be able to do all this cool stuff. And then it's they can't plank for 30 seconds. I remember one of the articles, this was a long time ago, that you wrote, is I guess, I don't know if it was I don't know if it was a track athlete or somebody that you got called in to work with, and they were trying to figure out what's going on, and you're you did your stuff, and you're he can't hold a side plank for 15 seconds. And you guys are throwing all these advanced things at them. Yeah. And it was something he doesn't have the base, the basics. It doesn't have to be. It was
actually a Premiership soccer player who played in England, and I was flown into Nike to work with him. And it was, I would call it I've used the phrase, you're underpowered athlete, right? They don't have enough base conditioning. So he was so talented that he never went through sort of long-term athletic development. And now you're at the top of the game with basic holes in the game, because his ability to compensate was so amazing that he could do some amazing things. But I'm nervous going into those situations, because I'm wow, this guy is already at the top of the game. What if I do an assessment? I'm yeah, I got nothing. Right, this is it. End of the line. All boxes are checked. You move well. Your mobility is good. Your strength training, you're strong. Your conditioning is good. I got nothing. And then you find the hole, and you're wow, maybe it won't make a big difference, but there's a hole in this and I can fix it.
So I think that's a good transition into one of the things that you posted recently on Instagram that someone had a question about, is like, hybrid events are super popular right now. Hyrox, DecaFit, these things that are meshes of, you can argue the semantics of it, but the average person is going to think this is a mix of strength and cardio, right?
Yeah.
So, and you put a post up about people making the mistake of like, well, if I want to get strong, the guys at Westside are strong, so that template sounds good. And if I want to be fast, like they're pretty fast in Kenya, so I'm going to take, the Kenyan runners program, and that's my 6 day a week program. And then they're like, I can't walk, I'm slow, and everything hurts.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so walk me through, can you elaborate more? I mean, obviously, because on Instagram, we're limited to characters and trying to get things out quick, but can you elaborate on that mistake of what people are doing and trying to kind of, piece together the best of column A and the best of column B and getting nothing in column C?
Yeah, I think it's actually more common than we think. And I think if you look at things like mixed martial arts, maybe a better example is I've been working with pentathlon recently. So mixed martial arts, you got your striking, your grappling, your jiu-jitsu. Like maybe it's a kickboxing class, a wrestling, a jiu-jitsu class, and you get your strength and conditioning. But there's no head coach running the whole program, right? So in pentathlon now is the reason I've gotten involved is the fifth discipline in pentathlon used to be horseback riding, and now it's obstacle course racing. So it's now running, swimming, fencing, shooting, and obstacle course racing. And also you've got strength and conditioning, right? If you're any type of athlete, you've got somebody doing that. So what if the swimming coach just smashes them this morning? And then the fencing coach decides that we're going to do a whole bunch of drills, which is lunge, 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 right? And today I had lower body max planned as the strength coach. Right, something gets compromised because there's no head coach running it all together, right? So I think this happens too. Is someone's like, I'm going to get strong, and Westside is I think everybody agrees, what a proven way to get strong, right? And then you look at I don't know, like Tour de France level programming for cycling, right? Or a marathon training program. You're like, man, those guys get in shape. They get good cardio, right? Let me just match them. But you need a head coach to go, the Westside guys weren't running a 10K that morning. And the marathon guys weren't doing, 8 sets of 3 dynamic effort squats, right? So you need a head coach who's running on both of them, or maybe a head coach who works with both coaches. What you can't do is just mix, it's like mixing 2 recipes that don't blend. You don't get the best of both worlds. You get the worst of both worlds. Like one of my athletes the other day, she did a 1 mile run at the end of a lower body hypertrophy session. And she was bummed that she didn't PR on her time because she was feeling good that morning. And I'm like, looking at your thing, you did 18 lower body sets basically in this workout. There's some ramp up sets, right? I would question everything I knew about training if you had a PR after that, right? Like it's supposed to be like a muscular endurance test. So I think it's just be aware if you don't have a head coach, either your running coach or your strength and conditioning coach has to be the head coach, or have input from them saying, hey, I've got one guy, he's qualified for the Ironman World Championships in France, and he's doing the LA Marathon next week, and I'm his strength guy. And I adjust because the running is the most important thing. Because we hit a certain number of, like he gets a little bit meatheady, and he's trap bar deadlifts. I've targets I want guys to hit that I think are strong enough, right? And as he's getting up, he's excited, but then it compromises his running, which is the priority goal right now, right? We have to hold back in the weight room because I don't want to compromise the running, which gets us into real world periodization. There'll be a time of the year where I'll have priority and the running can be compromised slightly. But it's this idea that you need to we're looking at one body, right? We're not looking at a runner, right? We're not looking at a power lifter. We're looking at a runner who needs to be strong, right? Or a power lifter who needs to get cardio, right? Or just somebody who wants to do a hybrid, a Hyrox or a Deca. You need somebody to design the whole plan together. You need a triathlon coach for triathlon, not a running, swimming, and cycling coach who don't know each other and never talk.
That's a good analogy. So, I like because that one I think most people can resonate. Okay, that makes sense. But with the other stuff, they don't necessarily.
This triathlete, like I said, is we have the head coach is not me. I'm the head strength coach, but I get input on things. But that idea is that you don't pick 3 sport coaches and then you have a nutritionist who doesn't know what he's doing training wise to design his diet, and I don't know what anything else is doing. So it's just this, if you're training seriously, you deserve to have a head coach, and it can be anybody you want. And if you get a good, I think a good fitness coach usually, like, I understand that the goal is not the weight. I'm GPP. I'm GPP injury prevention. I've got one athlete in particular who I can tell you is any events that she's lost, it's not because she's not strong. That's not the bucket. Right. That bucket is checked. So I have to pull back there to fill the other bucket. So the classic example is just, I'll get the Afterburn one was a good example. I would get people who'd said, I'm doing the Afterburn program exactly as you wrote it, but I'm also still doing chest, shoulders, tries on Monday, back and bis on Wednesday, and I'm doing a 5K running on Saturday. And I'm like, you should try it all with the vegan diet plus keto and intermittent fasting as well and see how it works, right?
Yeah, and so the nutrition piece
this needs to be a plan.
Yeah,
your nutrition's got to support your training, right? Like, that's the part, but it becomes like I don't want people, when I wrote the Afterburn program, I kept the carbs quite high because I wanted to fuel the training.
Yeah, right? And that's what people don't understand is like you're going to run this super intense workout, right? This 4-day a week, just like onslaught, right? Like, you look at like someone like Pat Davidson's like mass program where it's just like, it's an onslaught every single day. And then like, I'm going to go low carb and just be in like a 1,000 calorie deficit every day. I'm like, you're never going to survive. Like, you're never going to make it.
It's always like the missing, like, piece of it. Like that it came with the nutrition, right? It wasn't like a separate nutrition that we just copied over, So I think that's the idea, that we're working with one body, everything's holistic. The example of the ladies going from 2+2 to 3+3, and there was a down regulation in meat, you can't ignore that, right? Their lifestyle couldn't support the additional training, so you need to adjust the training. So the reason for that is, like, it sounds a little bit self-serving. You need a head coach, or you need somebody overseeing it that makes sure these things integrate and don't compete. They complement and don't compete. I
have a client who wrestles at an Ivy League university now, and you would think, at that level of university there would be someone like that, someone who's in like a case manager situation. Hey, maybe this plan is okay for this person because they're not starting, so they can handle some more intense training. And it was like they came back from like a bad weekend of wrestling, and it was like, the coaches decided, like, all right, you know what? You guys aren't strong enough. We're testing everything today. We want to see I want everybody to max out on the bench, and we're getting some numbers. And it's like, what do you think? Like, and like, listen, I think that guy's probably doing the best he can with whatever skill. He's obviously in a position that is not appropriate for whatever his, but like it's like you're saying, it's trying to get all these things to piece together. This is, it's one body, it's one piece. You have a nervous system, and just because something isn't necessarily sore doesn't mean that things aren't taxed. And it's frustrating sometimes to say the least.
I always like to think he's doing the best he knows how, right?
Sure.
And he thinks this is a solution to what's going on. But if you got on a flight from LA to Scotland and it takes 12 hours, you just had a 12-hour rest, right? So you should be able to just go into the gym and max out on the squat and hit a PR. No one thinks you could do that. No one thinks that's possible, right? Because that travel can be tiring, right? So we have to take that. You don't arrive, if you were competing internationally, you don't arrive the day before the event, right? You've got to give yourself a little downtime. But if you've got a client who's got a busy week or an out of control week, like their week was crazy, the kids were in hospital, they lost their job, the kids were in hospital, and you're like, too bad, it's max there for Mondays. Like, then you're a horrible coach. So like, you come back from a wrestling program and the coach is just like there's a little part where like, I'm going to get you guys in shape this week then, right? We're going to run and condition a lot, and not only will you not be ready by Saturday, you will be worse and you'll get beat. So
as always, man, I appreciate your time. I thank you everything that you've done, not just for me, but for our industry. I'm glad to see you guys still, kicking butt out there, and I appreciate everything you do. Anybody who's listening to this that wants to find information from you, either fitness wise or fitness business wise, where should they look?
I think my Instagram, I just do it by myself. Like, so if anybody reaches out there, and not anything that I'm doing, any seminars or stuff usually get mentioned there. And if you DM me on that, I try my best to get back to everybody. So, and I appreciate you thanking me, Brian, but it is not needed. You've done great stuff yourself in the industry and you're paying it forward, which is all I've ever asked. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Well, until next time, Alan. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Cheers, guys.